Okay, Ash, I don't even know if I got these recordings. This Zoom is giving me a lot of trouble. Just want to say. Like I lose recordings. Right now, this recording is blocking my view. Oh my God. Okay, you cannot minimize Zoom when you're recording. Yeah, okay, great. Get out of my face. Okay, great. Okay, let me get on speaker. Pin. And start the recording. Wait, how do I do that? Ah. Hold on a second. Oh, we are recording. Okay. Oh my God, I'm so confused. Okay. Great. All right. So moving quickly to Split the Sack, which is on page, where is it? Somebody speak up when you find it. I'd appreciate it.
It's 44 on my book.
Thank you. Okay, probably mine too. 44. Yes. Okay, great. All right. So in this next two poems, we're going to look at something very important. I'm going to do what I call my now famous forgiveness workshop. There is some elements we need to understand about this. Forgiveness, in my view, is the number one skill that one needs to have when one is in a relationship with anybody, right? And we talk a lot about forgiveness. We hear a lot about forgiveness in religious context and so forth, and nobody really knows what it is. So today, or how to do it, right? So today I want to really go into that and give some practical advice and also give some insight into the deep meaning of forgiveness. Why should we forgive, right? And so we're going to do that when we get to the second poem for today, but I want to really save some time for that because very important topic. So, okay, so let's start for now, Sprig of a Herb. Good. Yes, so it begins like this, right? Page 44. Why does the soul not fly when it hears the call? Why does a fish gasping on land but near the water not move back into the sea? And then I skip a little bit. We are out of our cages with our wings spread, yet we do not lift off. Okay, all three verses say the same thing, right? And all three verses are comparing us to some animals who are having some odd behavior, right? So you have the bird who has wings, but is scared to fly. It's ridiculous, right? If you were looking at that bird, you would say, but you have wings, fly, right? Air is your element. This is where you will find freedom, right? And the same, you look at the fish on the land, is squirming on the land, trying to breathe, and you're like, go in the sea. Why are you there? And the fish is like, no, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of the sea. And you're like, what's wrong with you? The sea is your element. This is where you will be truly fish, right? Okay, now you get the image. Now, how do we sometimes look exactly like that bird and exactly like that fish? And what would you say to yourself or to that person based on these verses? So tell me a little bit, how does this look often like what we do? How do we look like that bird and how do we look like that silly fish? Sanchez, you've had your hand up for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I would say that for this, the sky is like love for the bird, so the bird can fly. The bird can fly through it freely, and they can. It's like this massive feeling towards everything, and then the same thing for the fish is like to go into the sea is to go into that love. So like sometimes as humans we kind of fall out of it. We kind of like we drift away from people, being a romantic or just friends, kind of drift away, and sometimes we end up on the sand where we need to go back into that to have those connections. So this
Yes.
love keep us together.
Very nicely put, right? We don't realize what those of us in the class, and it's probably all of us who are afraid to love. Here's the message, right? You are afraid to love because you are afraid something bad will happen if you get in a relationship. The text is saying something worse will happen if you don't get into the relationship, right? The true death is not the death that comes when you love, is the death that comes when you don't love, right? It is better to die a lover's death than to die a non-lover's death, right? So he's basically saying you're afraid to die. You're afraid that by flying or by swimming in the ocean, something bad will happen. And he's basically saying it will be worse if you don't go in, right? Because to go in is to really become the fullest version of yourself, right? The bird who doesn't fly is half a bird. And the fish which doesn't swim is half a fish, right? To truly be a fish, to truly be a bird, you have to spread your wings. You have to take that leap. And very often what we don't realize is when we take that leap into the unknown, into something challenging like a relationship, this is when we actually blossom as the fullest version of ourselves, right? I've spoken to a lot of students quite recently, right, who spoke of heartaches and broken hearts and so forth. But what we noticed is even though the heart was broken, they had become a fuller version of themselves. They had become a more loving human being, a more courageous human being, right? So there's truly a blossoming that takes place when you love, so that even if the love doesn't work out, the blossoming still took place. It's always worth it to try a relationship, because always you will become, some of you will open up, parts of you will blossom that cannot blossom by yourself, right? So that's the first thing we get. Very nicely put, Sanchez. Let me skip a little bit to this very interesting passage, which says, it's talking about a game. So I'm going to read it and then I'm going to explain the game. So he says a few lines down, we keep collecting rocks and broken bits of pottery like children, pretending they are merchants, where we should split the sack of this culture and stick our heads out. Okay, so let's look at that kind of strange example. So let me put it to you like this. How many of you, when you were younger, you traded something with people, kids, other kids? Put your hand in the screen if you're familiar with that. Okay, what did you trade? I'm curious. What did y'all trade? Sanchez.
Oh, for me, the first thing I think of is Halloween candy.
Okay.
I used to trade Halloween candy.
I used to do that too. Noble, go ahead. What did you trade?
In middle school, me and my friend used to go to this vending machine, and they used to like give out these little like domo monsters, and they each had a different costume. So we would always trade like which one we had doubles of. We would trade with something new.
Okay, great. Okay, so you all know this thing that kids do, right? Me, when I was a kid, I was a nerd, so I traded stamps. And I had at one point stumbled upon a very rare stamp. It was a 1 cent stamp. And I know one of my friends who was a little older than me and much more shrewd than me, he had a 3 cent stamp and mine was more valuable. And somehow, I don't know what happened, right? We had a discussion, we had a conversation, and I ended up trading my 1 cent for his 3 cents, knowing deep down that mine was more valuable. And I remember he kind of, he did something to my brain. I remember walking home. I was very young. I was maybe 5 years old and the kid was 12. So he was much more worldly and savvy than me. But I remember walking home feeling that something deeply wrong had just occurred, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So this kid really, I'm still mad at him for robbing me of my 1 cent stamp. So anyways, basic idea is when we're trading, right? We expect I give you this and you give me the same value. I'm not going to give you, like you're saying, Halloween candy. I give you, Kit Kat, and you give me, I don't know, an apple. No, it's not going to work, right? So this is the idea that often in love, we are exactly like these children. So what does it mean? What does it mean that often in love, we play the game of love exactly like these children? I remember Rumi is seeing this like a problem. This is not the path for Rumi, but tell me a little bit, what does it look like when we love like these kids play? What does it look like when we love like merchants? Explain to me the metaphor here based on everything I told you. Donaldson, go ahead.
So I think of like reciprocation, when you do something for someone, you expect that in return. And, people are all different, and I don't know if it exactly works that way. And that's kind of what Rumi is stating. For example, like communication, like if you communicate with me, I'll communicate with you. And I think a common kind of theme is when one person doesn't communicate, why am I going to communicate with you if you don't talk to me?
Okay, very nicely put, right? We tend to give expecting the exact, right, equivalent thing in return. And we treat love as a transaction, right? In other words, I'm gonna love you as long as you love me. I'm gonna talk to you as long as you talk to me. I'm gonna give myself to you as long as you give yourself to me. And we don't realize, right, that this is entering into the realm of transaction, which is not the realm of love, right? For Rumi, love is always going to be a little bit, there's always an element of inequality. There's always a too much, right? This is crazy advice, right? Because we are taught in our culture, which is a capitalistic economic culture, right? That I give, you give, and we good, right? And often we have an arrangement. I'll give you just this, and then they give you just that. We have an arrangement often to keep things superficial, to keep things temporary. We know how to dose, and we explain, I'll give you just that, and you give me just that, and we're good, right? And what Rumi seems to be saying is that, no, we should split the sack of this culture and stick our heads out. So let's look into that. What would it mean, instead of being in a transaction, to split the sack of the culture? Rudolph, any ideas?
Well, yes, I'll answer to that in a minute, but what you were saying preceding, I connected to the line of love is nothing but gladness and kindness again, that we spoke about earlier. That kind of gladness I mentioned earlier, in my mind, is connected with a very deep sense of hospitality that you have to carry in yourself, like a hospitality of your soul, the hospitality of really wanting to host things that people around you, humanity around you brings to you. You have to be receptive, and you have to party with them in a sense that you really treat them welcoming, and that sense of hospitality is the fundamental element of gladness and kindness. If we are always looking to receive back what we give, we will never achieve any kind of understanding of a selfless life, of a selfless love. Doesn't mean that you have to give your cash away because you don't need it any longer. It doesn't have to be criticism on capitalism or owning a nice car or wanting to go buy nice clothes. It has to be with the graciousness of being hospitable and pleasant and free with your feelings and your reception of other thoughts, virtues, your good mood, your humor, all the things that we've discussed so far. I strayed a bit, so I don't recall what you asked me the second question, but
This is good. This is good. I love that. Let me repeat so everyone can write, right? This is about love as hospitality, right? Love as accepting the other as they come to us with their peculiar gifts and their peculiar idiosyncrasies and their weakness and their strength, right? The ability, I tell myself, I say it like that to myself, it's the ability to love both the spirit and the flesh of another human being, right? You love their strength, their power, but you also love their weakness, their fragility, the ability to welcome it all, right? Without constantly being on the bartering, right, level. I give you this if you give me that. It's about just simply you love because that is this is who you are, right? This is so very nice. I like that very much, this interpretation. Instead of seeing it as a giving, you're seeing it as a receiving, an endless receiving, right? And then there's this flip side, which is an endless giving, right? You're able to pour your love endlessly without thinking, I'm getting this, I'm getting that. I'm just giving the love because that is who I am. I am, right, somebody whose nature is to love, right? I mean, does the flower, when it's blossoming, think, I'm a blossom only if, actually, some flowers do that. Sunflowers, they only open up if the sun is there. It's like, no sun, screw you. Right? So, but in general, right, nature is giving without thinking about what we're giving back, right? Nature is giving freely. And in a way, we're invited to be like nature and give freely of ourselves without thinking, oh, I should, they should give me back and so forth. You give of yourself because that is what sets you free, right? You are loving, and in that way you are expressing fully yourself, and you're set free, and that just simple giving. So infinite receiving and infinite giving instead of the barter, right? I love that. Thank you, Rudolph, for that extra bit of insight. Okay, and of course now we split the sack of the, okay, so let's look at this. What does it mean to split the sack? So let me explain, right? Actually, let me ask you, we've all been through this. We have all at one point split a sack. Can anyone tell me what is this sack that all of us split at one point and we stuck our heads out? Can anyone tell me what he's referring to here? What is the experience we all went through? Sanchez, go ahead.
Our birth through our mothers.
Yeah. Exactly. This is our
Yeah.
birth, right? He's talking about the birth process. Now he's going to say something interesting. He's going to say, to truly love, we have to be ready to be birthed. In other words, we have to be ready to move outside of the womb into the great unknown, right? And it will feel like something extremely traumatic, right? Let's imagine the baby for a second. Have you ever imagined the baby in the womb at the time when the contractions begin? I mean, imagine your baby, you're floating, right, in an ocean of Mozart music and, you know, cupcakes that you're smelling, and you're happy in your mother's womb. And all of a sudden, first contraction, bath, you're like, whoa, what's this? Now you have less air, less space. These contractions are, and then all of a sudden you're flipped upside down. Now, I think as a baby, you are thinking the end is near, right? The end is near. And now slowly these contractions are pushing you out of the only place you know, the only source of comfort you know. I mean, I think the baby thinks it's about to die. I think the baby is like, it's over. That's why when it comes out, it's screaming, right? It's like, ah, what just happened? So the baby thinks it's dying, but actually is being born. And very often we go through experiences where we think we're dying. It's so painful. It's so hard. It's just so challenging. I'm dying. Everything is dying. And yet this, we ought to remember what Rumi is saying. We are actually being birthed into the best version of ourselves, right? And the same for the relationship. As a couple, you can be birthed through the trials and tribulations you go through, right? And so he's saying, you know, split the sack of comfort. Split the sack of just, you know, being comfortable together and stick your heads out, go through the challenges, go through the difficulties, and be reborn as a being, as an individual, and as a couple, right? Sometimes also as a couple, we ought to be reborn. Okay, now we're going to go to the next text where I'm going to go into this forgiveness workshop, which is no expectations, which again, I can't find. I should really mark these. I should really simply mark these. It's not hard. What page is no? Thank you. I got it. Page 76. Okay, 76. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit into the beginning. It's towards the end that we go into the forgiveness issue, which I want to quickly, you know, breeze through a couple lines in the beginning and then get into that forgiveness issue. So the best thing I'm seeing here is be foolishly in love because love is all there is. You've seen so far, right? I'm just going to summarize a little bit. You've seen so far how Rumi is not talking about being prudent in love. He's not talking about being smart in love. He's talking about throwing yourself in the love situation, right? And going along with whatever comes your way. So he's very similar here to the Song of Songs, right? Where the lovers throw themselves. In Rumi, the only wisdom is take a leap. That's the only wisdom he gives us. He's not like, you know, Plato, where it's like, okay, make sure you have similar values, make sure they elevate you, make sure they're from the same culture. You have all this good advice in Greek philosophy. Sufism is like, just throw yourself and then learn from your partner, right? That's basically the idea, or learn from the circumstance, or learn from the trouble, right? So this is why it says, right, be foolishly in love. In other words, don't be too calculating. Should I, pros, cons, right? It's like, just throw yourself, fly, swim, right? And then of course he goes deeper about love being the dissolving of the will. And we talked about, again, this ability to die for our lover, right? This ability, this humility we have to listen, to change. This is the dissolving of the will, right? But now I want to get into this very peculiar passage on page 77, 5 lines down. Be clear like a mirror. Everybody has it. Wave at me if you have it. Be clear like a mirror. Okay, I have 2 waves, 3 waves. Okay, thank you. Okay, good. Okay, be clear like a mirror, reflecting nothing. And for a while I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense, because a mirror always reflects. So I was pondering this for ages, and I think I finally got it in the context of forgiveness. So hold your questions for a bit. I'm going to first give a connection to forgiveness, and then you'll see what this passage actually means. And then we can go into last few questions. So I'm just going to do the forgiveness workshop and then go back to this interesting 2 lines, right? Which I think is talking about forgiveness. So forgiveness is a word that's tossed around, and we know we should kind of do it, and most of us don't. And so I want to go to the roots of it. The roots of it are Hebrew, and one of the most important words. There's many words for forgiveness in the Hebrew language, but the one I want to look at is nasa, N-A-S-A. Okay, nasa, and this literally means. Let me put it in the chat also. What it means? It means to carry. So that's kind of strange. Okay, so nasa literally means, before it means to forgive, it has several meanings, right? It also means to carry. So to forgive, first meaning we get, to forgive means to carry. Okay, well, that sounds tedious, right? That means you hurt me and now I'm going to carry that. What does that mean, right? So I want you to look at it this way. First, let's analyze briefly. All of us, I want you to think of a time when you were hurt, somebody hurt you. And I want to ask you, what was your first reaction? When someone does something to you, what is your immediate reaction that you're going to have before you start to tell yourself, I should forgive them? Right before. First immediate reaction. Garcia, go ahead.
I was upset.
You were
Like,
what?
I was upset.
Okay, upset. And what were you thinking you could do at that moment? Or what were your thoughts?
I was really thinking about how this will affect me, really.
Okay, very good, right? So you're thinking, you're upset, you're angry, and there's 2 ways we deal with the anger. There's the extrovert and introvert way. Both are bad, right? First, extrovert way. I'm gonna hit you back. You did this to me, watch me, right? I was listening to a conversation on the bus one time, and I really didn't need to be there, but I was stuck there. So this woman was on the phone talking to her boyfriend who was cheating on her. And she was like, oh yeah, well, watch me do it. See how you feel when I start to do it. Like, she was threatening this guy, and it was hilarious. Like, she was like, yeah, and I'm going to go with that guy. And that she had the whole, and the whole people in the bus got to listen to this interesting reality show, right? So this is first impulse, right? Extrovert impulse. Someone hurts you, I'm a hit back. You yell at me, I yell at you. You insult me, I insult you. You cheat on me, watch me, right? So second way, which seems a little more better, but it's not, we internalize and we become cold and distant, and we cut them off, and they're not in our lives anymore, right? I tend to say, I guess I'm both, I do both. So, but when I do the internal one, I'll tell my parents or my family, I'll be like, this person simply doesn't exist anymore for me. They are not breathing in the same world as me. They don't exist, right? So this is this is the internal. I'm resentful. I'm going to harbor resentment. I'm going to be distant from you. I'm going to ignore you. You don't exist, right? Now, notice how both of these are ways that and this is the key, make sure you get this, right? Both of these ways are ways that we reflect back the evil that was done to us, right? We're hit with the evil and we throw it back in their face, whether it's in the extrovert way of I'm gonna punch you back, right? Or the introvert way, I'm gonna hate you in my heart, right? But both are ways that we throw back the evil on that person. That is what it means to carry. So to carry is the opposite. To carry simply means this, right? Make sure you write this down. To carry or to forgive simply means this, is whatever people do to you, you don't reflect it back. Okay, let me say that again, right? So you can write it down, right? Whatever people do to you, you choose not to reflect it back. Okay, so what does this mean, right? So let me switch cameras because at this point, losing power and I just need to rely on my shitty camera of the computer. So here we go. Sorry about that. It's very different now. And I just need to plug in my computer before I go further in my explanation. I'm resourceless. I keep on buying some kind of plug where I can plug everything and nothing works. So it's not like I haven't been trying. Okay, back to forgiveness. Can you guys see me in spite of the blur? Like, is this okay? I feel terrible. I look like a ghost. Okay. All right. So forgiveness. So make sure you write this down, right? Forgiveness is something happens to you and you refuse to throw it back, meaning you refuse to allow what happened to you. You refuse to reflect it back. What does this mean? It simply means that you refuse to allow what happened to you to make you into a worse person than you are. Someone speak about you in a way that's, petty, and you don't do it, meaning you don't allow that what that person did to make you into a petty person. You see what I'm saying? Someone is violent with you and you choose to respond non-violently, meaning you refuse to allow that person who is violent to make you into a violent person. So what really happens when you refuse to throw it back in their face, when you choose to carry, is basically you are protecting yourself from the evil that has just been bestowed upon you. So let me explain. You've been hurt, but you're not allowing that hurt to damage you. Let me explain. Let me say it again. This is very important. Someone hurt you, but now the next step is not allowing that hurt to damage you or to poison you or to become toxic in you, meaning that hurt is not now going to alter your emotions or your behavior in a toxic way. You see? So in other words, you acknowledge the hurt, but you don't allow it to become toxic. You don't allow it to make you into a worse version of yourself. That's it. Let me say it again. You receive the hurt without allowing it to make you a worse version of yourself. So this leads me to this very important realization that nobody, and make sure you're listening now, this is very important also for those of us who are afraid of loving because we're afraid of being hurt. The key here to realize what Rumi is saying, or what we'll see him say, is that no one can damage us, right? People can hurt us, but no one can damage us. Why? Because damage is simply this. What damages you, so make sure you write this down, what damages you is not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happened to you. Okay, let me say that again, right? Because this is what you need to get down. What damages us is not what happens to us. It's how we respond to what happens to us. So nothing that happens to us can really damage us. It can hurt us, it can wound us, but it doesn't have to make us toxic and poisonous. It doesn't have to damage us. And so we should never be afraid when we enter to start a relationship thinking we're going to be damaged, right? Because the damage is never what happens, it's how we respond to it. Right? And so to forgive is to respond in a way where you don't allow the hurt to become toxic. Everybody clear? Do you follow what I'm saying? Let me check the gallery really quick. Wave at me if you understood what I said, if you're with me. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that so that's the essence of forgiveness, right? Forgiveness simply, I choose not to respond in the same way that you treated me because I don't want to be damaged, right? Okay, now I see a bunch of hands. So okay, fine. Let's take a few questions and then we're going to talk about who are the three beneficiaries of this, right? So let me get Sanchez really quick, then Rudolph, and then I thought Donaldson had his hand up really quick. So let's start with Sanchez. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just the carrying part really showed me a different perspective of everything, because usually you try to find a way to navigate it and solve the problem in a certain logical way, or try to find the issue, but in reality it's not about trying to find this thing, it's about being able to change this attitude within yourself and be able to then have that as like a way of living for all those instances, all these things that are negative.
Yes.
So that really enlightened me. I really like that. And
that's the first step, right? Before you can even begin to address the problem, and we should address the problem, right? Forgiveness doesn't mean you become the eternal victim, right?
Right. No,
but before you can address the problem, you have to go deep within and get into that state. And then from that place of forgiveness, you can talk to the person and say, listen, it would be nice if you didn't talk to me like that, or it'd be nice if you didn't do this, right? So we do have to address it, but we can't address it until we've done this deep inner work, right? So very nicely pointed out, Sanchez. Thank you. Rudolph, words.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if is anybody in this class practicing martial arts? Is anybody who ever practiced karate, kenpo,
in the past,
judo?
In the past, long ago.
In the past?
Good, yeah.
So Damien, when you did this, and you were a young student with a white belt,
Yeah.
and dummy Axel would walk up to you and go in a fighting stance and start hitting you, what would be your response as a novice? As a young
Probably
student,
try to block it maybe.
you try to block it, and I beat the hell out of you because I am very aggressive and I'm 5 belts higher and I attack you. And what does that do to
Oh,
you?
then I'd probably try to avoid it. I'd probably go with, more
You
evasive.
avoid it and it makes you
Yeah.
angry and aggressive, if I may ask, is the typical situation. So why am I
Yeah.
bringing this up? Because when you were talking, Professor Dekan, I wrote down Kenpo, practicing martial arts, and the art of sparring, of going into the ring to fight with each other without harming each other. And it's an interesting thing that you learn as you go along in martial arts and become a higher belt and eventually achieve a black belt, because you're going from being the victim of an attack that harms you to someone who turns the energy of the attack against the attacker. It is an attack and it may hurt you, but it will never injure you anymore because you're able to turn the whole mojo of the impetus of the attack against the aggressor. And I drew this comparison because, look, I have sparred with my wife for decades. And in the beginning, we hurt our feelings. And now we still spar, but there are no more injuries. There may be attacks because it is life, and life fills us with aggression and makes us angry about things I do, she does, kids do, friends do. But there comes a point when you are smart enough to think, wait a second, whatever happens here really doesn't hurt me, doesn't change me. And if I really take it to heart and let it injure me, then the injury is really on me. The onus is on me to create communication that redirects that energy and allows the sparring to continue until both components are equal again and we both bow and we leave the ring.
Love it. I love it. Yes. I love what you say also about not allowing ourselves to be hurt when this happens, right? When someone aggresses us, what the first thing, I tend to take things very personally. So I will be hurt and then I will start to hate. What I've noticed in my life is that actually when people do something very violent towards me, it's actually coming from a place of hurt in them, right? And to realize that any offense that people do against us, anytime someone hurts us, it always comes from a place of trauma or pain in them. And to recognize that really helps the process of forgiveness, right? I have something that I tell myself now when someone has hurt me. It's a kind of prayer where I'll be like, Lord, heal them where they hurt me, right? Heal them where they hurt me. I recognize that where they hurt me is coming from a place of woundedness, right? And this can also very much, so thank you for mentioning that, right? To not allow, and of course, I love the soft power, the ability to transmute the aggression into something else, right? Which is, in this case, love, right? You're transmuting the violence into love. And in that process, you will not get hurt. On the contrary, right? This is the only way to avoid damage. You have to transmute that energy. It's a transmutation of energy. You have to transmute the violent energy, the negative energy coming towards you, into loving energy coming back to them. And this is the only way that you avoid, right, the damage. So, okay, so you have a gist of it. Now let's look at who are the beneficiaries of forgiveness. Why should we forgive, right? So number one, first beneficiary, the obvious one, ourselves, right? Main reason I forgive is for me, right? I forgive because it's the only way that I will allow myself to not be damaged by the situation, right? So forgiveness, or this ability to just take it and not throw it back in their face, to transmute the negativity into light, right? The darkness into light, into love. This is the only way I will protect myself, not from the hurt, right? I will still feel the hurt, but it'll be a hurt which is not toxic or poisonous. It's the similar when you're wounded, the difference between a clean wound and a wound that begins to get infected, right? You want a clean wound, right? Which will heal very quickly. If the wound gets infected, if your pain becomes toxic and poisonous and resentful and hateful, this is the infection. And this is when you will begin to become damaged, right? So first beneficiary is us. Now, second beneficiary, who is the second beneficiary of forgiveness? There are 3 total. So who might be the second one and how? Anybody know? Noble, go ahead.
Would it be the other person?
And how? How do they benefit when, suppose you don't even talk to them, you're not in contact with them and you've forgiven them, how do they benefit?
As opposed to cooking up a hot revenge, you can just take the hurt instead of like hurting them twice as much as they hurt you.
Yes.
They'll like get away. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. So first of all, right, by transmuting by refusing to throw it back in their face, you're not hurting them, right? There's an even deeper meaning that I want to talk about, but first maybe Sanchez, go ahead. Yes, so that's the obvious, right? You're not hurting them. Go ahead, Sanchez, sorry.
I was just gonna add on to what Michaela said, that like it's also about like admitting to your faults and acknowledging that you too were wrong, and that both sides have these certain layers, parts to ourselves that are not seeing the other perspective. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Yes, I love that, right? I kind of taking a moment before and asking yourself, why are they doing that? Right? What did I do maybe to provoke that, right? So taking a moment, right, as you're transmuting to kind of, become introspective. Another way I like to explain it, and this is a little bit kind of mystical, but it's the best explanation I have. How many of you have heard about the notion of karma in Hinduism? Put your hand in the screen if you've heard about karma. Okay, karma is, what people deserve, right? This is a kind of justice system, right? Where if you do something bad, then, in the universe, you trigger some bad luck for yourself, right? So it's interesting view. I want to use the concept of karma. So basically, when someone does something wrong, this is karma, right? You do something wrong and somehow you will get it back, right? What comes around, what's the thing? What goes around comes around. Yeah, what goes around. There's a song by Timberlake. What is it? Timberland? Yes.
Justin Timberlake. Yeah.
Yes, Justin Timberlake. What comes around goes. I can't say it. What goes around comes around, right? So we have this. This is a law of the universe, right? That if you do something bad, you're gonna get something eventually. Later in your life, maybe, or the next few months. So this is kind of supposedly in Hinduism, it's a law of the universe. I want to suggest that when you forgive someone, you annul their bad karma. This is very interesting. In other words, whatever consequences was supposed to hit them because of what they did to you, which sometimes we revel in. We're like, you know what? I'm gonna forgive, but bad things will happen to them on their own, right? That's not forgiveness. True forgiveness is you realize you're neutralizing their karma. When you forgive deeply and you transmute their negativity into love, you are in a way annulling the bad karma. Whatever is supposed to happen to them because they did this to you is not going to happen to them, right? You've given them a clean slate on the level of karma, right? So of course, I can't prove any of this, right? But it seems from my experience of forgiveness, I've noticed, right, that forgiveness also gives a total clean slate to the other in terms of they are now able to move on with their lives without being burdened by the evil that they did to you. You have taken away that burden, right? And finally, of course, the universe is the third beneficiary, right? The universe is the third beneficiary because you're not bringing in more evil into the world than there is already there, right? To close though, I want to add something which I don't usually add, and this is more of a religious interpretation. So up to now, I spoke of forgiveness as something that anyone can do without any reference to God or religion or anything, and certainly this is enough practice, right? And this is something we can all do. But this is something that I noticed in my practice as I started to forgive and carry, right, whatever they were doing to me, somehow that burden started to lift off of me. This is very interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. And this is connected to a very interesting word by Jesus in the Lord's Prayer, where he says, forgive our sins like we forgive people who sinned against us. And I was always, this is so obvious, why is he preaching that? This is weird. This is banal and trivial, right? And actually I realized this, as we forgive, we are forgiven. In other words, as we choose to release the other person, we are released from that pain and from that trauma and from all of this darkness that they have thrown upon us. I have noticed this is actually a true metaphysical law that Jesus is quoting. As you release the other person, you are yourself going to be released, right? It's not, it goes together. As we carry the other person's evil, God takes it up, right? Takes up our trauma, our wounds. You can see it religiously, or you can see it just in terms of a law of nature. As you release, you are released, right? That's the idea. So very interesting. If you want to be free, right, completely healed of the trauma of what happened, release the other and you will be released, right? That's the idea. Forgive and you will be forgiven, right? In that sense. Rudolph, some words. Go ahead.
And I'm wondering if anybody agrees or you disagree with me. If you think back to the Song of Songs, where we're talking about a woman discovering a tremendous level of self-assurance, when you exonerate someone, when you deny them to hurt you, you are empowering yourself, and this denial takes you out of the situation of inferiority where an aggressor afflicted harm to you, and it can easily turn, and 9 times out of 10 it does that. It turns into a level of self-assurance, not necessarily superiority, because you don't need to develop that false pride to now forgive and therefore you're the bigger person, but it just simply shows to yourself that you actually have it in you to forgive. And within you, within that glass of ocean that we talked about before, you are now capable to reflect. And I wanted to say this when you were asking about the mirror, but I had to step away. When you reflect on that mirror is only a mirror because it does reflect. Something has to look into the mirror in order to reflect. And if you are the mirror, you need to be able to see this, not necessarily reflect it, but see that this can be reflected. So there is a lot to be said about averting aggression, and I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us back to the text. So the text, right, as it reads, back to Rumi, page 77, be clear like a mirror, reflecting nothing, right? This is forgiveness, right? I am clear, I absorb it, right? I don't reflect it back. And this is what makes me clear, right? This is what frees me, actually, when I'm able to absorb, transmute that energy into love, into forgiveness. I am actually become clear. I become free. I become, right, in a way, healed, right? This is how I heal, right? So such an important skill, and I really hope that you practice it. It takes a little, it's not immediate. I'll tell you one experience where someone very close to me betrayed me very deeply. And I think it took me about 6 months. I mean, I would start, so every 2 minutes, I would have nasty thoughts about that person. Yeah, you did this, you jerk. You can't believe you did this, right? And I would actually discipline myself. I would be like, and I had a simple formula. Each time the thought would come, I would just say, even out loud, I would be like, I choose love. I don't want to feel angry. I want to feel love. That's all I said. I didn't even try to be loving. I wasn't. I hated them. But I was saying out loud, I choose love. I want to be a loving person. And each time the thought would come, I would respond in the same way, mechanically. And at first, every 5 minutes I was doing that, speaking to myself in the subway. And then it would space out. It was interesting, every hour. And then the thoughts would space out even more, maybe 3 times a day. And then only once a day I'd have a bad thought about that person. And within a few months, no more thoughts. The whole thing was lifted out of me, right? That's why I very much like the words of Jesus, forgive and you will be forgiven, right? Because as I was practicing forgiveness, as I was carrying their burden, right? Their evil, their wounds, right? It was also being lifted off of me, right? As you free someone, as you practice forgiveness, you will receive yourself this kind of, it will be lifted up from you. One day you will not feel like that anymore, right? One day you will not have all this resentfulness and this pain and so forth. And that's the best way to really achieve complete healing, right? So that's just for the practice, right? It's not something immediate. It's something which for me can take several months of simply every thought responding, right? And if you practice this, it's an ascetic practice, right? If you practice it, you will really cleanse yourself completely, right? Rudolph, last words?
Sorry, I was delinquent in removing my hand, but I can't agree more.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. So good. So for next time, always the same thing, right? You are listening to the recording on Kant. Okay, now we're getting into more difficult material, by the way. Up until now was the appetizers. Now we're going to get into much more difficult material. So you absolutely have to listen to the recordings or you will be completely lost. So Kant is one of the more substantial. We have a German with us in the class, Rudolph, right? This is German stuff. This is, think of German bread, right? It's the same thing. So if you don't know what German bread is, Google it. Maybe Rudolph, if you were in person, you could bring us some German bread so we could get an idea what Kant.
Actually, a very good baker. I would make baking some bread for everybody.
Are you a good baker?
I am indeed.
Oh no, why are we virtual? This is so sad. Okay, it would have been perfect. So yeah, listen to the recording, do the audio question again, do the reading, and then do the reading assignment. And then you can start already working again on the test question, Rumi. You can even start thinking about your essay. And that's all for now. Any questions? Any last questions before we stop? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.